Hi, I'm Shannon from houseimprovements.com, and today we want to talk a little bit about reciprocating saws. So I've got a bit of a assortment of saws here, mostly the yellow brand, but that doesn't really matter. You're going to find a lot of the same features on most every saw. The little bit more higher end ones you're going to have slightly different or more features, but basically they all operate the same way. So we've got a selection of cordless battery operated recip saws on this side. You may have also heard these saws referred to as Sawzalls. That's actually a brand, but reciprocating saw is the general name for any of these types of saws. So I've got the cordless ones over there. I've got the corded version right here. With today's battery resources and technology that they have, a lot of these battery operated ones are just as good as the cordless one as far as I'm concerned. These two here are my own personal ones. I honestly have not used this corded one for a long time. I actually had to blow the dust off of it when I got it out today. So I guess to start out with, we'll just take one here, just talk about some of the features. And just on a safety note, as always, if you're changing the blade or anything, make sure you've got the cord unplugged. If you're using a battery operated one, most of them have a lock mechanism on the trigger. So make sure that's locked at the very least. And it's probably a good idea to remove the battery as well anytime you're doing anything with the blade or whatever. While we're kind of on safety, wouldn't hurt to remove the blades as well if there's a chance one of your kids might get a hold of them or whatever. Or sometimes even if it's just laying on the floor, I like to take the blade out because those can be sharp if you happen to trip and fall on it. So, okay, so we've got the blade the cord unplugged, and we're just going to take this recip saw right here and talk about some of the features. So first off, they're generally all shaped much like this, although you're going to see a few that are shaped a little bit differently like this and are just a little bit more compact. Okay, so you can kind of see the two here. You can see the length difference, and basically the idea on this is it's just a little more compact. You can get into tighter places. This one actually measures less than 16 inches, I believe, from here, from the shoe to the back end. So you could actually physically put it into a stud wall and make some cuts without, things being in the way. So, okay, so that's that. Now there's generally two different styles of ways to remove and change the blade. Most of them now are coming with some type of a lever like this that you just pull up, pull the blade in and out. Basically the blade, they're all going to have some variation. They're usually pretty universal, but they're all going to look something like that on the back end. The blade itself can be put in either this way or the other way. Depending on what you're cutting, you might want to be closer to the edge. You can kind of see how it's not centered in the front of the tool. So if I turn it that way, I'm a little tighter to this side if I want to get up against a floor or a wall or something. This way I've got a little bit more room to work. Okay, so they've all got some kind of mechanism like that. These ones are all the same style. This one's just slightly different. It slides sideways to pull the blade out, but really they're all pretty similar. The other common style you're going to see, usually on the lower end saws or older saws, is it'll actually come with a little Allen wrench that might be attached to the cord somewhere or stuck into the tool somewhere, and there'll be an Allen set screw down in the end of the saw here that you have to loosen off, pull the blade out, put the blade in, tighten it back up. Not as convenient. These are really nice. They just make things so much quicker and easier in today's fast pace of renos. So that's the blade. A lot of them will have an adjustable shoe here on the bottom. So basically there's a couple functions of that. One is it does help you actually to be able to use have better use of your blade. So if you've got it in there and you're cutting a lot of items that are, say, an inch wide, or maybe you're cutting some metal conduit or whatever, you're going to wear out those teeth right in that section. Eventually it's going to get dull. So instead of just taking that blade out and throwing it away, you could extend this out, and now you're using a different section of the blade. Okay. Another use for this is if you're going to do a plunge cut with this particular saw, I would typically have the blade in back this way. extend the shoe out, and you can kind of use it as a fulcrum. So it gives you a little bit of a leverage point down on your work surface. Maybe it's easier to see on there. And like in the instance of doing a plunge cut, you would start out hanging onto the saw well like this, pull the trigger to start the blade sliding in and out, and you'd be able to rotate on that shoe when it's down like that. It doesn't work quite as well this way because the blade, you can probably see the shoe is actually pretty much off the table there and the blade's already touching. So I'm going to actually demonstrate that cut here in a few minutes. So that's kind of a couple of the uses of that shoe. I suppose as well, it would also adjust if you're cutting through something and you know, you can't get a short enough blade and you don't want your blade stabbing through too far. Maybe there's some wiring or something else in the way. You can adjust this shoe out so that the end of the blade that's actually inside your wall or your floor or whatever you're cutting isn't protruding too far in to catch other things. So I guess that would be the third use. This particular one has a 2-speed switch over here. So that's this one. They aren't all going to have that. Like I spoke about, these ones have a lock. Some of these, especially the cordless ones, have a lock on them to lock the trigger out so you can't actually squeeze the trigger. I think that's about it as far as the basic functions of the various saws. I guess the only other different thing this one has is it actually has a hook on it. So if you're, you know, maybe climbing up in the rafters or you got somewhere you can physically hook this onto something instead of setting it down on the ground, having to bend over all the time, or you know, find some place to lay it. So that's kind of handy function on that one. Okay, so we've looked at most of the functions. Let's look at some of the blades here. So I'm just going to take this blade out. This blade here, and most of them will actually say on them what they're made for cutting. This one is, in particular, is metal. And you can usually tell that by how fine the blade, or how fine the teeth are on it. Where if you look at this blade, they've got it marked as a wood blade. You can see the teeth are much more aggressive. I'll just try to hold both these together like that. So you can see this one's generally going to be made for wood. You wouldn't want to cut too much for metal with that aggressive of a blade. There's many blades also that'll be kind of dual purpose, and they might even be called demolition blades depending on what manufacturer you buy from. So they're great if you're, you know, doing a lot of rental work where you're cutting, you know, cutting walls where there could be nails in there or screws in there. It will actually function and cut both products quite well. Now, as far as blades go too, you know, there's going to be all kinds of different sizes, and there's other types. There's ones for cutting cast pipe and all sorts of different things. But like I said, they'll generally show you right on there. They'll probably even show you how many teeth per inch there is, that sort of thing. Like for instance, this is 18 teeth per inch, much finer than this one, which is 5 teeth per inch. Okay. So lengths as well. I don't have a real long one with me here to demonstrate, but I mean, you can have some that are, you know, 15, 16 inches long. So, okay, so that's kind of the different blades that you might come across. I think safety-wise, we'll get into that. We already talked a bit about, you know, unplugging your cords like any other power tool when you're changing blades, that sort of thing. Locking out the triggers, taking out the batteries. Other things you're going to want to have is earplugs. So you're going to want to use some hearing protection. You're going to want to definitely use some eye protection whenever you're using these products. Because you're going to be cutting, there's so many things you can use this for. Like for a renovator, if you don't have a reciprocating saw, you need to buy one. You need to go out right now after this video and buy yourself one, because you'll wonder what you ever did without one before. They're just super universal, super handy. So I think the next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this corded one out of the way. Now I mentioned before I was going to demonstrate doing a plunge cut. So this would be a case where either maybe a floor or a wall, some kind of surface, and you're wanting to cut something out of it. Let's say this table right here, and you know, you can't cut in from the side. You want to start right here. There's a couple ways you could do it. You could either drill a hole with your drill and a drill bit so that your blade will fit in that hole, or you can make basically a plunge cut. So to make a plunge cut, I'm replacing this tabletop at some time, so I'm just going to make a quick cut here. So with your plunge cut and any other cut, you always want to be hanging on well to the reciprocating saw, because the one thing it wants to do, if you're not hanging on well, is it wants to just shake your arms off once it gets cutting. It starts binding a bit, and then it's just giving you one of these, and your cut's going to be very inefficient, and you could get hurt too. So you want to have good control of your saw. You want to make sure you've got the appropriate blade in there. And for a plunge cut, I'm going to start out basically sitting down like this, and I'm going to squeeze the trigger. Oh, I got my lock on still. I'm going to squeeze the trigger. This one happens to have a light on the bottom end. I'm not 100% sure if the other ones do or not, but that is kind of nice too. Squeeze the trigger, get the blade moving, and then you're going to want to just start to tip this down into there nice and slow, so it can start to make a nice horizontal cut until it starts plunging down and actually breaks through the bottom side of the wood. Now, anytime you're making a cut like that, you want to be aware of anything that might be underneath or on the back side, plumbing, electrical, I don't know, whatever. You want to just try to be sure you know what's inside that wall so you're not cutting into something else. Okay, so I'm just going to put in my hearing protection and I'll show you a plunge cut. So once we've got that right through there, now it's right through whatever surface we're cutting. Now you can do whatever you need to cut out the hole or make a straight cut or whatever you're wanting to do. But it's that initial just getting yourself through there without frickin' ripping your arms off because it's binding and slamming itself into the cut. Okay, so that's that cut. Now another common cut you're going to be, you might be cutting off a 2x4, you might just be cutting a wall off. You know, actually in one of our other videos that you've probably already seen, we actually used this saw to cut the studs out of a wall to demolish it quicker. But I'm just going to show you, how easy one of these will go through a piece of wood. Now you can mark a line, depends what you're doing. You might be marking a line and trying to follow it. In this case, I just want to demonstrate making a cut. So there's a couple different ways I can do this. I can start with the shoe right against the work surface. And in that case, I would probably want to have the blade turned the other way. Because I get a little bit more of the shoe on the surface. Okay, so in this case, if I was cutting straight down, I want to hold lots of pressure down to keep that shoe tight to here. And it doesn't really matter what position you're in, you're wanting to keep that shoe tight to the work surface. Okay, so you just, again, start the saw up. I've got the shoe against the product I'm cutting. And then I want to just start the saw into it nice and easy and cut with the speed that the saw will cut it. Don't force it. Okay, so you can see how quickly that cuts. I mean, that's a new blade and everything too, but, and again, if you had a demo blade, this could have been a stud where there was some nails right through the end of it. And we would have cut right through all of it. So I think that pretty much shows you everything I can show you about these saws. Like I said, very handy. You're gonna wanna get one. The minute you try it, you're gonna just think of all kinds of uses or places that you could use it that maybe you've been monkeying around with some other tool that doesn't really do the job correctly. Okay, so hopefully this video helped you, and if it did, give us a big old thumbs up down there on the bottom corner. And if you haven't already gotten sick of watching my videos, I hope you haven't, you can always go to our forum. If you have any other questions about a project, a tool, or a video that you've seen, go to our forum and post that question up there. And I'm on there every day quite a few times. We've got some other guys on there that are really helping out there and giving a lot of good information and help as well. So if I don't answer you, one of them will, or maybe one of the other members that is on there will give you a hand as well. So check that out. You can check out our Patreon campaign if you feel like you'd like to help support us a little bit. And there's always our website at house-improvements.com. Thanks a lot.